Most of your assignments so far will have required you to answer questions. Many of you will have answered these questions quite successfully, although you probably haven't given much thought as to how you went about answering these questions. In your dissertation, it's important not just to think about what your answer is going to be, but how you're going to go about answering it. This is what we call your research method. To discuss research methodology and research methods, I'm joined by one of the law school's most experienced researchers, Dr Ayesha Shahid.
Hello, Stuart.
So, Ayesha, why is it important for students to understand research methods?
Research methods form an important part of any research project, whether you are writing an undergraduate dissertation or a postgraduate dissertation, or you are working on your doctoral thesis. The knowledge of research methods is important because it allows for the collection of valid and reliable data. It also, in turn, helps you to verify the conclusions that are drawn and that conclusions are accurate and reliable. If you end up using a wrong research method, or if you apply a research method without fully understanding it, there is a high risk that you will end up making flawed claims. Therefore, it is important that you must have the knowledge and understanding of what research methods are and how those methods should be used in your own research.
So what's the difference between research methodology and research methods?
Well, the two terms methodology and methods are often used interchangeably. However, in the context of research, there is a difference between the two terms. Methodology is the term that refers to the underlying theory or a set of principles that inform the overall design of your research study. Methodology helps you to proceed further in your research. It provides the foundation of your research, and in that sense, you can say that it is the blueprint of your research and it is of utmost importance. On the other hand, research methods are the procedural steps, or you can say certain technical procedures that allow you to collect and analyze your data. So, for example, qualitative research or quantitative research are the most commonly used research methods in any research that is done in the field of law. And then you have certain research tools that are used in empirical research, for example, questionnaires, surveys, focus group discussions. So there is a difference between what a methodology is and what are research methods, and then what are the tools that are employed for the collection of data.
So most students will just read a whole bunch of primary and secondary stuff. Is that a literature review?
I think first of all it is important to explain what primary sources are and what are the secondary sources. Primary sources are the statutes, the acts of parliament, and judgments issued by the courts, whereas secondary sources refer to the books, monographs, journal articles, and chapters published in edited books. Now, simply reading a couple of, for primary or secondary sources is not what is called as literature review. Literature review means that the researcher should be able to understand and they should be able to synthesize and analyze the research that has been done previously. They should be able to understand and analyze what are the main arguments, what are the gaps in the existing literature, and they should be able to compare and contrast the viewpoints expressed by different legal scholars on a particular issue of law.
So you've mentioned the difference between primary sources and secondary sources, and what we really mean is, as you say, primary sources are acts of parliament and case law,
yes,
and secondary sources are your books, your journal articles that
yes,
either explain what the law is or critique it, yes?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So what is doctrinal legal research?
Doctrinal legal research is the most common methodology that is used by those who undertake research in law. It is used for identifying, for synthesizing, and for analyzing the content of the law. Most doctrinal legal research is based on what is known as a black letter law approach. and it focuses on the knowledge of law that is found in the content of law, that is either in the form of statutes or in the forms of parliamentary acts or in case law. Doctrinal legal methodology focuses more on the legal texts and legal theories and statutes and court judgments with little or no reference to the world outside law. So in simple words, we can say that doctrinal research focuses on the letter of the law and not a law in action.
Is doctrinal research a suitable methodology for an undergraduate law dissertation?
For an undergraduate law dissertation, it is important that students should focus on analyzing the law, and the purpose of writing a dissertation on a legal issue is not just to describe the law, but the purpose is that the students should be able to synthesize, they should be able to summarize, and they should be able to analyze the law. So they must have those legal analytical skills to ensure that their dissertation is not descriptive.
Are there any research methodologies that might help students find ways in which the law might be improved?
Well, there are different methodologies that students can use to suggest improvements in the law. For example, they can use comparative law methodology. In comparative law methodology, students can compare the two legal systems, or they can compare a specific law in the two countries, and then what lessons can be learned from that comparison in order to improve or reform the law.
So comparative legal research is just about writing about two countries' legal systems and which is better?
No, comparative legal research is not just about writing two countries or legal systems of two countries. It is about the lessons one can learn by making that comparison in order to improve the law. So basically, comparative legal methodology can serve as a benchmark for reforming the law in the other country.
So what is empirical legal research?
Empirical legal research is evidence-based research that seeks to understand and explains how the law works in the real world. In other words, it is a type of research which is based on observation and experience rather than the simple theory. It is about what impact a law has on the society or on individuals or on communities or wider organizations. Empirical legal research also engages in assessing what the impact has been of, for example, political, legal, social, and cultural aspects on the implementation of the law.
So we're mainly talking about surveys and interviews and questionnaires.
Yes,
and that type
so
of
these
thing.
are the different tools that you use for the collection of empirical data.
Would you recommend empirical research methods for an undergraduate dissertation?
I would not recommend empirical legal research for undergraduate students because empirical legal research requires a longer framework of time, it requires more resources, and undergraduate students do not have that much time to conduct an empirical study, because for empirical study you have to first of all identify who will be your research participants, you will have to develop questionnaires, and in the case of undergraduate studies or for an undergraduate dissertation, students do not have that time available to them to conduct empirical data collection.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, even with my PhD students who are working over 3-4 years, I often question them when they suggest empirical research methods because it sometimes just isn't the most appropriate use of your time.
Yes, and it also depends on the nature of your research project. It also depends on the aim and objectives and what research question are you going to address in your research study.
So which research methods and methodologies are best suited for undergraduate dissertations?
I would suggest that they should follow a more analytical legal method, and they can also look into comparative legal methodology, where they can compare the laws of two countries and then suggest improvements or suggest what lessons can be learned from the other legal system.
Or socio-legal methods, perhaps?
Or socio-legal method is also another approach that can be used for an undergraduate research study.
Can students use a mixture of these methods?
Of course, they can use a mixture, like for example, quantitative and qualitative methods can be used, and that is known as a mixed methods approach that can be applied in a research study.
Where should students go about explaining their research methods?
Well, they can, for an undergraduate dissertation, I would suggest that they can briefly explain their research methods in the introduction. They do not need a full chapter on research methodology because they are not carrying out any empirical data collection. If it is a doctoral thesis and if it is an empirical research, then obviously the expectation would be that students will be writing a full-fledged chapter on methodology. But for an undergraduate study, I think just one or two paragraphs briefly explaining the methods and the methodology in the introduction will be enough.
Yeah, because most undergraduate students, as we've said, will be using doctrinal legal research
or comparative legal research.
Yeah, yes, or you know, critical analyses,
yes,
and socio-legal methods, and it's just really about explaining why this is an appropriate way of answering this question.
Yes, yeah. So that is the purpose of using a methodology or methods in research.
Do you have any final advice for our students?
Well, my final advice to the students is that there are a range of books available on research methods. In our library, there are online resources available. So they must engage and they must read those first before embarking upon the dissertation project. I would also like to say at the end that students should know that there is no hierarchy in terms of the research methods and methodologies. All are equally important. It is the best methodology would be the one that through which you are able to answer your research question and you are able to achieve the aims and objectives of your research.
Ayesha, thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for having me.